You're listening to a CNA podcast.
When you talk about an island paradise, one of the first places that comes to mind for many people is Bali, Indonesia. Its stunning natural beauty and rich culture have long made it a favorite. But lately, the island's been getting some bad reviews.
Bali is currently experiencing a traffic crisis. It's taking 2 hours on the roads to get somewhere that's a 15-minute walk.
And I'm sorry, but it does not live anywhere near to the expectations that people have told me or the research that I've done.
First time we came to Bali, we were a little bit disappointed, because on social media and things like that, it makes it look like it's just like jungles everywhere, and it's kind of not like that. So
Hang on. All these reviews are about South Bali. Authorities know there's a problem. One solution? Get more people to go to other parts of the island, particularly the north. And that's where a brand new airport comes in. I'm Teresa Tang. This week, CNA's Nivell Rayda joins me to talk about whether Bali can convince visitors to take the road less traveled. Hi, Nivell.
Hi, Teresa.
Good to see you again. The first time I went to Bali, it was more than a decade ago, and it was everything I hoped for. It was beautiful, rejuvenating, top-notch hospitality. One of my friends, they recently came back from vacation there, and she said, "You know what? You aren't missing much. It is so crowded. It's busy. It's just not that fun anymore."
Yes, you're right. Overtourism has really taken over in Bali. Beaches overcrowded, packed with people, day in, day out, low season, high season, especially the high season. Rice fields and lush forests turn into villas, congestion everywhere. People are missing their flight because it was so packed. The traffic was so congested, like they couldn't get to the airport on time and missed their flights. People were carrying their luggage, dragging them across the street while they walk for maybe like a kilometer or two to get to the airport because it was so jam-packed. And really, we're seeing a lot of development happening in the last 5 years because of COVID. During COVID, businesses went under, people had no money because Bali is so dependent on tourism.
Yeah.
No tourists was coming in, and you see a lot of people selling their properties for cheap. And a lot of businesses from Indonesia, Jakarta especially, Surabaya, and people from overseas, they snatch up the opportunities and they bought the property and then converted into their private villas, boutique hotels, restaurants, cafes. And that's what we're seeing the effects of recently. But mind you, this, as you said, this is affecting South Bali, specifically within the 15 to 30 kilometer radius of the current airport, the only airport, the gateway to Bali in South Bali.
I have not been to northern Bali personally, and I'm wondering, had you traveled there before covering this story?
Yes, I visited Bali since I was a kid. Even I went to North Bali 10 years ago in my 30s. I was visiting a friend who came from North Bali, and it's vastly different. Like the beaches are very quiet, mainly because the surf is not as good as the South Bali, because South Bali borders the Indian Ocean. You got a lot of wave. That's why a lot of surfers are attracted to South Bali. It's vastly different from North Bali. Like the beaches, they're placid, they're calm, they're quiet. I didn't explore much of North Bali then, but I can tell like this is the quiet side of Bali. And part of it, that's the charm really. You get to see Bali the way it has been even before this tourism explosion going on. My friend took me to this one village, this is where tradition has been observed. Like people still live in traditional houses, traditional community. You can see the way people live day in, day out. Tradition is still very much observed in North Bali. So yeah, it was a very different experience from the hustle and bustle, the cafes, the nightclubs of South Bali.
So why aren't people visiting? Is it just because it's hard to get to?
Yes, it's very hard to get to. If you travel from the airport, which is near Denpasar, the capital, it will take you like 3 to 4 hours because it's so far, it's so remote.
You're driving? That's the only way?
Yeah, that's the only way right now is to drive or to take a bus. I imagine if you take a bus, it will take probably longer because it's separated from South Bali by a mountain range, And so you have to go up and down the hills through snaking, winding roads before you get to the main city in North Bali, which is Singaraja. Imagine if you want to go to visit the more remote parts of North Bali.
So enter a new airport. Pretty ambitious plans here. Because besides the airport, authorities are talking about revamping the ports, constructing shopping malls, convention halls, hotels. Can you tell us more about the strategy?
Yes, the thinking was, let's get people to North Bali to solve not only the over-tourism in South Bali, but also the under-tourism, the underdevelopment of North Bali. What they realized is that a lot of people are complaining about the travel time. So the thinking was, let's get people to come to North Bali by building an airport. That's one solution. Another solution is let's build them a toll road. Let's build them like a seaport. People with their speedboats or with their yachts or cruise liners can come to visit North Bali easily. But the problem is, all this needs to happen at the same time. Can you imagine, like, if you build an airport that is so far away from where people want to go, which is at the moment is South Bali, without an airport, it will take them 3 hours just to get to where they need to go from the airport. So is it really feasible in a business sense? Another consideration is that, okay, suppose that Bali has 2 airports. How are they going to divide their duties, basically? Will one be dedicated, for example, for low-cost carriers? Will one be catered more to domestic and one international flights, for example? All these considerations need to be thought of, which is why the thinking is, let's get all this infrastructure happening at the same time so that by the time the airport is finished, you got the toll road ready, you got the seaport ready, because there is a lot of underutilized airports in Indonesia, which only caters like between 2 flights or 7 flights a day in some parts. So they're vastly underutilized. And part of the reason is because the interconnectedness is not there. And I spoke to Mr. Erwanto Adiatmoko Hariwibowo, which is you can say like the main investor in this project. And he is convinced that not only that the airport will be built, but also will bring much needed economic development in North Bali. Here's what he has to say.
With the presence of an airport in North Bali, there will be a balance between the economy of the south and the north. Not just where the airport will be located, but neighboring regencies will also benefit from this economic equality. We won't just build an airport. We will build a new city in support of the airport. There will be 5-star hotels, event halls, theaters, housing, and tourist attractions. There will be what I say is a global film production hub. They have Hollywood, and we will have Bollywood.
But you spoke to some locals and they're not excited. They're wary of this project. What did they tell you was their biggest concern?
People in North Bali are actually split about this. Some welcome this. This is a much needed boost to their economic development. They long to have some way for tourists to come to North Bali, whatever that is. But of course, the mood that I'm getting from people there is that, yes, we want an airport to be built in North Bali, but we don't want the effects of it. Because when you have an airport, and we've seen it in South Bali, they had an airport since the 1930s, and over time, it became into this boom town with tourists and over-tourism, massive congestion everywhere. So they don't want the effects of it. And I spoke to the tourism chief of North Bali, Buleleng. His name is Dodi Hanggodo, and then he really captures like the mood of the people in North Bali. And here's what he has to say.
The Buleleng government welcomes the new airport because it is meant to develop the economy. But we must ensure that we mitigate the negative impact of this development. Over-tourism in the south has led to more crime, vice, trash, and also the disrespect of local culture. To be honest, Buleleng does not want these things. These potential impacts need to be studied thoroughly.
Bali is heavily dependent on its tourism industry. So, Nivell, when I hear you talking about travelers flocking to the north instead of the south, that makes me wonder how these plans are going to put the island in competition with itself. How do those in the south feel if maybe the north takes away the tourists that they would have received?
Surprisingly, the people in the south are equally split about this project. Some of the people feel like, yes, there is an overtourism in South Bali, and yes, we do need to address this issue because it affects Bali as a brand or the image of Bali. When you have overtourism, it's really bad for business. But there are also people who feel like, let's keep North Bali the way it is, because there are a lot of tourists, especially those from Europe. They're not looking for the hustle and bustle of Denpasar or Kuta or Canggu in the south, but they're looking for more off the beaten path places. They're looking for a more back to nature, or they want something authentic experience. And that's the reason why people come to North Bali and willing to spend 3 hours in a car just to get there. Yeah.
American writer Mark Twain, he once said, "There's no such thing as a new idea." And that came to mind when I was preparing for this episode, because that's the case here. The idea of an airport in the north, it's been floated before, but didn't get off the ground. Those plans didn't pan out. Why?
Yeah, you're right. The idea has existed for many years. I spoke to people in North Bali, like, when is the first time you hear about this plan? And they said it's date back at least like 10, 15 years. I guess one of the reasons is money and also the political will. They keep talking about this year after year. I guess it has been promised by various politicians looking to woo the voters in North Bali, Buleleng especially, because it's the most populous part of Bali, the most populous regency in Bali. So you got a lot of voters residing in North Bali. So this has been going on year after year. The urgency is also questionable. Here, the idea being revived in 2017 when there was a huge eruption in Bali's volcano, Mount Agung, which causes the airport in South Bali to be closed for days. And people were asking, like, wouldn't it be great if you have two airports, one can stay operational in case these things happen? And it was floated again during the G20 summit because you have all these world leaders coming in to Bali and they completely shut the airport or commercial flights. And another issue is that the current airport sits on a very peculiar location that is not able to expand. So adding another runway, for example, that would be very problematic because it's so overdeveloped. The places around them is so overdeveloped. There's just no room left to make upgrades or extension to the current airport.
Then how different are plans this time around? And a question listeners probably have is, how soon could they be landing in North Bali?
Yeah, the difference this time is that Prabowo is really interested in this idea of having a second airport in North Bali. And he mentioned that with the presence of an airport, it can spur economic development. Investors will come in because North Bali is so underdeveloped. There's still a lot of land there. There's still a lot of opportunity for growth there. He imagined like investors will come in and build hotels and build concert halls and shopping malls. And he projected that North Bali can become the new Singapore or the new Hong Kong. So that's really the difference. So there's at least a momentum rolling here. And people I spoke to, the officials I spoke to, are confident that by 2030, they will have new airport. But of course, the real question is, will people actually come to North Bali? Yeah. Because right now, all the tourist destination is in South Bali. All the places that people want to go is in South Bali. So you have to convince not only the tourists, but also the airliners that it will be profitable for them to open a route from, let's say, Australia all the way to North Bali instead of going to South Bali. And that will take a lot of time as well.
2030 is not that far away. It'll be interesting to see how this project progresses. Nivell, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Teresa.
Catch up on all of Nivell's reports on Indonesia on YouTube and also on CNA.Asia. And there are TV episodes of CNA Correspondent every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. I'm Teresa Tang. The team behind this week's episode is Saya Win, Clara Ong, Crispina Robert, and Craig Dale. And as always, a new episode drops every Wednesday. Do join us again then for more. Bye for now.